Hisham Shahid, for joining us, for accepting our short notice invitations. I know he had a busy schedules in Delhi, so but we had no other time today. This session of his book, which is of very interesting stories. Not only that he's chosen the title Bihari and with the bag full of stories, but that by itself it attracts lots of people to see and read this book. But I was just telling him that the similarity of being long staying in one country and you have the similar kind of lineup for ourselves, for myself at least, when I start writing and reading this book, I enjoyed a lot, especially when he landed in different territories, carrying with him the Indian democracy, going to different place where he could put it on differently that because of Osama bin Laden and because of the discussion was not taking place in a country like Saudi Arabia, but he was in a country like India would have been a story debatable and everybody's the talk of the town. So that give you an indication where his roots are in the villages of Bihar, and he left the country to stay in a different part of the world, sacrificed a lot, and also you have to compromise in many of the issues when you live in a country like India, and then you go outside, especially in the Arab country. So you need to have abide by the law of those countries, and if you do anything wrong, it may cost you your stay. And many people have suffered because of Gaza, and many of them actually lost their jobs and lost their everything in the country, and they were then deported from those countries. So I'm happy. I could not finish your book, to be honest, but I did read nice three, five, six, seven story in between, and I enjoyed it. The flow of the language, the simplicity of writing it. It's very encouraging, very heart touching. I have already circulated the CV of our editors, but let me just put two, three lines so you will know his journey as a journalist. He's a colleague who worked as an editor, journalist, columnist for over 25 years at several leading media houses and think tanks in India and the Gulf region. He has worked in the Indian Express, Kalish Time, Al Arabiya, and also Arab News, Trends Research and Advisory, and the Emirates Policy Center. He has been a Gulf correspondent with the Press Trust of India since 2007. Hisham has a Master in English from AMU, Aligarh, and also a postgraduate diploma in journalism and mass communication in Bombay University. He was also the editor of the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research from 2009 to 2016, managing editor of Al Arabiya English from 2016 to 2019. Hisham worked also as a corporate communication role at Saudi Basic Industry Corporation. I won't go into his detail. We will share it all with you, and whoever have got our mail also will have it received on the board. I will give you the mic, Hisham. Tell us about the book. Tell us about the journey and what prompted you to write such a beautiful book. Thank you.
Rava, thanks a lot for your time and for organizing this at a very short notice, as you yourself said. Uh, the similarity is uncanny because when you spend your childhood in one part of the world and you are uprooted for one reason or another, it becomes your choice to kind of try and enjoy whatever that world brings to you. But what I realized coming back over and over again and visiting my native place was that these are two different worlds with their own ecosystems and their own mechanisms, and but there are similarities. Human stories begin to look very much the same beyond a point. So you could see there are lots of social changes happening in this part of the world. There are lots of economic changes happening in that part of the world, and then within those different competing, sometimes complementing factors, you see the human element. So and I was not consciously putting all this together to write a book. These were diaries and these were interviews, these were conversations with people, but somehow it gelled into a whole that I could pitch as a book. And the fact that the journey started in a very interesting, if I may call it, the most lawless state of India called Bihar, made it a very sumptuous subject for me to piece it together, and that's how it came together. But then now, the more I'm thinking about it, it may look like a very uh, disjointed collection of stories from different domains. But if you look at the overarching theme, it is uh, human displacement and the human element that comes out of most political and economic stories that we see around the world today.
In terms of the shifting from Saudi Arabia to UAE, and being a Gulf state, did you find the difference in your own way?
Yes, so that UAE, Dubai was a happening place even then. It continues to be happening. It continues to surprise all of us in different ways. So it was more aspirational from one point of view. But then, since I was in the media, media was slightly more pronounced, more vibrant in the UAE. The country offered a few more choices, and I managed to find space for myself. That's how it happened. And then the thing with UAE is, once you get used to that place, it's very difficult to move elsewhere. So it just went on and on and on. And when I was almost done thinking, okay, media is not the space for me anymore, that is when I was given the choice of moving to think tanks and research centers. So I was fortunate enough to find some very challenging assignments, and I was fortunate enough to find them happening every few years. So literally every 2 years, 3 years, I was changing jobs, and I was happy with all those changes. So in hindsight, it looks a very eventful journey. Sometimes it was stressful as well, but I consider myself very fortunate that I managed to find all those things happening one after another. Yeah.
It's quite interesting because being a Bihari also is that your DNA is also very strong. If you think of coming back to Bihar, you have been after all this experience in the Middle East, what you will think of doing?
That would be. I mean, I'll go back to farming, because my family has been, very agrarian, in a very agrarian setup with, and I've seen the transformation happening in that space. In fact, I was, before putting this book together, I was much more fixated towards another subject, which was rural conflict and transformation. And every time I went back to my village in Bihar, I saw rural conflict and transformation, because people were leaving the countryside to come to big cities, and they were leaving their farming skills behind. And if you come to big cities and work for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and your children grow here, and you try to go back to your village, you're good for nothing, because you've lost your farming skills. So that's another conflict that gave me the recipe for a book. Well, that book is half written. Probably we'll talk about it when it comes out. But the Bihar in itself is very interesting, because we see a lot of political discourse around Bihar and Bengal. You know what Bihar thinks today, or Bengal thinks today, India thinks tomorrow. But then you also see a political culture, which, again, there is a theory that I've been shared with, is the decline of political culture in North India is because of the decline of universities. So it's probably a sociologist studying how these states have not grown in that sense in the last 20, 30, 40 years. But that's a subject of another debate. I just found Bihar as a very interesting example of people with a lot of talent and resources, and very fertile land, and a lot of things that should go in their favor is actually not going in their favor. So that made me Bihar as a very interesting subject. And also, I could see touch base. I could uh, go back every year and see what has changed, and there was not much change happening. I mean, you can have some roads built here or some electricity improved, but that's not change for me, especially when I see a lot of change happening. And again, change, you have to bifurcate. Social change is different from political change and economic change. So it has been a very interesting part of my being, trying to understand Bihar, and sounding as a sounding board for what is happening in the rest of the world. But yeah, Bihar is a subject that I'll probably continue to study and get fascinated by.
You did speak of the diaspora also, of Indian diaspora, and that. I mean, you didn't find it difficult to accommodate yourself in a short notice, right?
Yes.
And that is very important because of the people of Indian living in the, I think the largest expatriates in the world
Yes.
are the Indian. More than 9 million Indian live in the GCC.
Yes.
How did you get? I mean, you could integrate yourself more with the society or with the people there.
Yes, so the Indian diaspora is a very interesting case study, and I'm happy you raised this point, because Indian diaspora, as it exists today, is very different from what it was 25, 30 years ago. It was very much of a construction workers kind of an remittance-driven economy. Now the profile has changed completely. We have doctors and engineers and IT people and businessmen and all kinds of people in different fields. They're doing very well. So that has kind of changed the perception of the Indian diaspora as well. And I think the Indian community in general has reaped the dividends of. They're also the employers of choice in that sense. People would like to hire Indians, not just because of their skill set, but also because they're less troublemakers. And they're more accommodating, they're more anticipatory and emancipatory. So those factors have gone in favor of the Indian diaspora, but it's also very dynamic, as you would expect. So you have the very overwhelming presence of people from Kerala, not so many people from Bihar and Bengal, but South Indian states. People come there and they kind of make these countries their own, and they've contributed to the growth of these economies. And and it's an interdependence that has existed. So people talk about energy interdependence between India and the Gulf, but if you look at how the remittances have worked out, India has also benefited a lot from the money that has flown in from that part of the world. So it's something that keeps the Indian diaspora running and growing, and becoming more influential, which has strengthened the relations between India and the GCC. So that's a subject for analysts to understand.
Quite interesting, because this is very interesting to see Indian doing very well, as you said, not only as a labor class, but they have already built the whole of Gulf country. In fact, one of them is Dubai, is known for this,
Yeah.
and now Saudi is opening. You have the largest Indian community in UAE. You have second is Saudi Arabia and Oman, and name it, and there. So I think there is. Yes, I didn't talk much about the Biharis in in Dubai or in Saudi Arabia. Is that the reason why they don't help each other? Or- Because every third Bihari in Delhi, every third person in Delhi is a Bihari.
Bihari, yeah.
So I don't know
No,
why
it's
it's not in the Gulf.
unfortunately in the Gulf that's not the case. The Biharis are few and far between. Perhaps fortunately that, but and whosoever are people are generally they tend to, because you have a trend in Bihar, everybody wants to become a civil servant. So and I think they carry a bit of DNA when they go to the Gulf as well, and they want to be in more secure and stable positions. They don't want to take chances. You won't find a lot of businessmen, for instance, that are not willing to take risks. But those are attributes and archetypes that are associated with communities. So I wouldn't say just Biharis are like that. There are different people have different orientations and priorities. But so there are not too many to just sum up the answer to your question. There are not so many Biharis in that part of the world, but people who are there are very active, and they engage with the community, and they're generally looking after themselves and people around them.
I think I will open the floor for, let's have an interactive session. Yes, Ashok, please. Yeah.
What is the cause of migration from Bihar? Would you elaborate?
I think the primary reason is the lack of attention given to the farming sector and the collapse of industries. I mean, of all of North India, North Bihar, where I come from, even in my childhood, there used to be sugar factories and paper factories and lots of things. They just it didn't close down now, and probably even the rise of Lalu Yadav is generally attributed to the collapse of industries, but I won't get into the politics of it. The collapse of industries, and at the same time, since there were no opportunities in the farming sector, it was not made lucrative as it should have been for people to stay in their villages and continue to engage in farming. They had to move, and at the same time, I think globalization happened, and that is when a lot of labor was required in places like Delhi and Bombay, uh, and there was this flow of of people to earn their living because they could not see a long-term future for themselves. And to some extent, I see a reverse migration happening. But I think unless they are really engaged at the ground level, this is not going to be substantial, and people will head back to big cities if they are not given the opportunities in rural Bihar.
I see that there are a lot of migration of educated people.
Yes,
Some of them have become CEOs of the companies.
yes,
So it is not the farming alone, what
yes.
you said that farming has not become lucrative, but there are educated people who are migrated from Bihar.
Yeah, so that is that'll have to go back to a very complex set of problems that Bihar faces. For instance, in my village, I'll just give a very small story. And I think it was 2007, 2008, a government scheme was announced saying, if you donate X amount of land, the government will develop a hospital for you in the village, for you in the name of someone in your family. And that land was donated by my family, and it took 18 years for them to build a hospital, a two-room hospital in my village. And till date, this happened like a few years ago. And till date, there are no doctors and nurses there. So the infrastructure, so you can move people who suppose there is a CEO working here, and you bring an excellent opportunity for them to go back in Bihar and work. But if there are no adequate education and healthcare and other facilities, it is simply not viable for these families to settle down. So those accompanying factors that require people to make a place their own has been missing, and that is a concrete plan needs to be made to bring these people back home and give them enough incentives to live. It's not just about roads and electricity. It's about an ecosystem in which they feel confident about living, and their their future and future of their families addressed. If I have answered your question.
Sir, in your book, it at once attracted me roaming Bihari because I'm also like a roaming South Indian in late 80s. I don't know Hindi, absolutely, I don't. Absolutely, I don't know. I came to Agra, then I studied a lot of struggle because no electricity, mainly Gundagiri, Dadagiri. First time we saw a revolver, the hostels. Like that, we also roamed here and there. Finally, came here. Now we started in a late 90s, we started our practice in Supreme Court. We settled very well. So I found a common thing between you and myself as a roaming person. We also, when we came to Delhi, we came to only one pair of clothes. That's all and nothing else. Today we are comfortable. We settled. We are very proud of the system, whatever it may be happening.
Yeah.
But what was your basic education? I mean, primary education, how you brought up there, when you exactly migrated to other place.
Yes.
We migrated after graduation at the age of 22 years. So, comparison, I just wanted to know because that title attracted me like anything. Oh, I also roamed like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Roaming is a phenomenon that is
Just I wanted to know your basic
yes.
education was
Yes. So I started my
in
primary.
English medium or is it in Hindi medium?
Yeah.
Those things I just wanted to
It
know.
was a mix of Hindi and English medium, and I studied till I was in grade 7. Then I moved to Aligarh, and that is where I completed my education till my post graduation. So 10 years I studied in Aligarh. But around the time I moved from, so mine is a slightly different case. But what was happening at that time is a 3 year graduation in Bihar would typically take 4 to 5 years. More 5 years than 4 years. So if you have enrolled yourself as a graduate for a graduation course, it would take you 5 years. Now, if there is a student in Bihar who has the opportunity to move to a place like Bengal or UP or elsewhere, and he's eventually saving 2 years of his academic life, which was a choice everybody who could afford would take. So just because and because there was an education mafia at that time and things were horrible, I'm told it's slightly improved, but it's still not great. The kind of educational infrastructure. So that is another kind of migration. roaming is probably a loose way to describe it, but uh, I mean, there are lots of Keralites in the Gulf, so now I find lots of Biharis going to Kerala. That's a, that's natural that you would see happening, and it'll depend on how economics drive these changes usually. So it's a matter of choice. But for some, as I said, if I was when I was growing up in Bihar, the only choice was, if you have a choice of moving out of Bihar, people would take it if you could afford. If you can't afford to, that's a different matter. But everybody who had the opportunity just moved out. That may have changed slightly, but I don't think it has changed a lot. So I still see a major reluctance in Bihar to change, bring up a system that takes care of its people. I don't see much change happening in Bihar even now. So again, it's for political and social leadership and analysts and experts to understand. The book, as he said, is based on my experiences, and I don't put myself in any expert shoes as far as analysis of Bihar is concerned. But again, it's a very fascinating state, because it's also, you see so many bureaucrats and diplomats coming out of Bihar. I meet so many of them outside of India as well. So there is no lack of potential. It's just the ecosystem that needs to develop. And I think if Bihar gets its due, and if it starts to fulfill its potential, it will be completely at a different level.
There is no doubt, sir, because I am 2 years from Bihar. You can't imagine how much hard work they do. Morning 10:30 they will appear in 30,000 course, and again at 12 o'clock they will come to Indian house.
Yeah.
For the last many years, they are working like hard, very hard workers.
Yeah.
There is no doubt. And number two, they are very honest.
Mm.
They will tell you whatever they want, open-minded.
Mm.
Other people were very not. So you studied up to 7th standard in Bihar only.
Yeah.
Thereafter you went out.
Yes. And just to point out something Dr. Awad addressed earlier, the students when I was in university in Aligarh, 60, 70, 80% toppers in Bihar, in Delhi University, JNU, and all these, and even in Aligarh, were Biharis. And the simple reason was, when I would sit down to study in the evening, lights would go off. So and we had lanterns to study with, and my mom would say, after half an hour, just close it because it will spoil your eyes. So if I move from there to a place where there is 24-hour electricity and there are libraries open through the night, I would make the best use. So the circumstances back home kind of prompted and encouraged Biharis to do well outside. But whether they've been encouraged enough and emboldened enough to go back and change Bihar is a question for everybody else to answer, not me.
That is
Thankfully,
not
I don't
in
have
our
to.
hands, in the hands of big people. Thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned a very interesting point. I don't know if it the book or not, but the point is that there are migrations of Biharis because they love to have the IAS officers, and they all do these exams, and they be joining the civil service. But also we noticed of recently, more than a decade now, shifting with the farming, the farmers going to Punjab. There's a large number of Biharis in Punjab these days to cover the vacuum that the Sikh community have left behind.
Yeah.
I mean, we did the stories from there, and we noticed that there are lots of Biharis.
Yeah.
The changing of demography, we and then we displaced, that gave you a sense of despair.
Yeah.
But with change of government, you think that, I mean, this is just a personal point touch here. Is it change of government? You think it would make a lot of change in the Bihar?
I don't think so. Unless the I mean, you have to change Biharis for Bihar to change. I don't think a government change will make much of a difference. But maybe when a government with a defined agenda comes in with a set of programs to bring about changes that stops the movement of labor from outside, from the state to outside, and setting up industries to engage them. If all those things happen, you never know. Things might change. Things might change and should change. But I don't see that kind of impulse, and I don't see that kind of thrust yet. And that is why I'm not very positive that change will come anytime soon.
So, Etisha, my question is that we've all been a part of the diaspora at some point in our lives. what is it that you feel is what distinguishes the Bihari diaspora, just for the sake of conversation, from the other Indian diaspora? Do you think there is something unique, because your book is The Roaming Bihari? So I'm curious as to what do you think makes them a little different from the rest of the Indian diaspora?
That's a very interesting question, but I don't notice much of a difference. I mean, I don't. For instance, if there is a Bihari NRI and a Bengali NRI, I won't see much change. Probably it's also a north-south thing. I see a lot, very different approach from say Malayalis and Andhra and Tamil people living in the Gulf and elsewhere, but there is not much noticeable change. But again, these changes might manifest itself at personal levels and not so much at professional levels. So I may be sharing space with a Bihari who's in my workplace, and he's not over ambitious, for instance. So I won't attribute that to him being from Bihar. So I kind of desist from making that kind of judgment call, because people are different and they can be different and they come from different parts of the world. But collectively, there is no doubt that Biharis are among the most ambitious people. They are also among the most hardworking, as you said, and they also have a sense of righteousness. A lot of people, but that's why it's sometimes very intriguing to see, how can people who come from this part of the world and contribute so much and bring so much to the table, and then but they just can't fix their home, their state. And I made a comment somewhere that why, if India is run by so many bureaucrats from Bihar, why can't they just get together and do something about Bihar? And a lot of people did not like my answer, because that's probably not the kind of lecture they want to hear from someone who doesn't even live with Bihar. Because you see that when I go there, and if I try to make a few remarks, they don't like it. The Biharis, they would say, "Oh, आप 4 दिन के लिए आए हैं, तो हमें ये कहेंगे, ये कैसे होना चाहिए, वो कैसे होना चाहिए." So those kind of idiosyncrasies also exist, and I don't know whether it has contributed to Bihar not getting out of that inertia, but I think overall the attitude of Biharis towards their own system needs to change before anything changes. Again, I don't want to paint a very dark picture of what Bihar is today. I mean, as I said, people go out of Bihar, they do wonders. But when you go there, you see a lot of status quoism, a lot of acceptance of what exists on the ground. No, not much impulse when it comes to trying to change things. I mean, you could come back and say the same thing about Punjab, for instance. I don't have that much of access to Punjab, but in Bihar, I really see every time I go there, I see nothing has changed.
So for anyone who is planning to go and say work in the Middle East from India, what is the kind of advice you would give them?
Oh, that's a wonderful question, because what the one piece of advice I would get them: stop treating all of the Gulf as the same, because Gulf and even by wider Middle East is chalk and cheese. There are different kinds of economies, there are different trajectories, there are lots of things happening. It's sector by sector, so you cannot go and look for an oil engineering, petrol chemical kind of job in Dubai, which is a tourist center. You can't go to Saudi Arabia and do something. I mean, Saudi Arabia has been doing a lot in AI and other areas these days. So there, all the countries are different. The problem that I face in a place like the UAE is that there are too many people chasing too few jobs, because the UAE is the easiest access. Everybody has a relatives and friends in the UAE. It's easy to come and there are not too many jobs in the market there. But there are other economies, Saudi and Oman being the top two, and that are going through a different trajectory, the different curve, and there are far more opportunities that exist there. So these are the learnings that you get from your daily interaction. But overall, it's still a place where a lot of people, there's more meritocracy in the UAE compared to say other places. But that's just only a slight change. As long as there is a fit for the kind of skill you bring to the table, you kind of develop your own niche. So it's still a good market for people to try and find jobs, but you need to do a little bit of more research to get there. So, and there are different experiences different people go through. Young people find it's easier to get jobs. People of your and my age will not be able to get as many. So,
In terms of living in the Gulf country, I mean, we didn't find much of difficulty in accommodating, as you said, in this. But it comes also to my mind because uh, you may be in a way thinking that it's not worth leaving, or is it worth leaving? It is the compulsion driven you there. I understood, but in life, in terms of living, that is the point at which I sometimes find myself in the similar,
dilemma.
dilemma, and
Mhm.
finding out seriously, did I develop good friends? Did I have integrated myself into the society? That's a
It's a challenge, and it's a very good point that you raised, because sometimes I feel you have spent, someone like me who spends 20 years there, and then you are just good enough for that market. I may come back to India and try and get a job. I may not get the job that I'm looking for. So when you spend so much time, you kind of develop local expertise, and it becomes your natural instinct to stay as long as possible. So that's one fact. Plus, it also changes industry to industry. So if you're a veteran tourism manager, you will always have a place in the UAE, because tourism is never going to die there. That's their main bread earner. So those are factors that exist. Media is a completely different example, because there's been a shrinking of the print space. There's more .com and other digital media, yeah. And with AI, everything is going to change. So that region has its own churning, and it has its own positives and negatives as well. But overall, if it depends on whether you belong. It's a fit that has to arise. So if you land on a certain on the reception of a certain organization, whether you belong there will be determined by whether there is a fit for the skill set that they're looking for. So overall, it's still a place where, but I think the greater comfort in places like the UAE and also other countries in the Gulf is the security that you enjoy with your families and everything, and you don't have to bribe your way through anything. You can, once you have a settled lifestyle, you don't, nobody bothers you, and those are the kind of things that lure people in. Now we see a lot of retirees settling down because they find it easy to operate. They're very happy, and they don't want to go to another country. Lots of people from the West moving back because they see probably also from South Asia, people want to move to places like the UAE because it's closer to home. They're 2-3 hours flight away from home. So those are factors that are driving the new demography in the Middle East, and I think those factors will continue to remain relevant and also define what kind of people stay in the Gulf. And
anyone? Yes, please. Yeah.
Hi. So I'm keen to know about your initial months in the UAE when you moved around 2 decades ago. What was that like? Initial few months, maybe first year. Did you navigate, for example, food, culture, travel, language? So if you can tell us something about that.
sure. So UAE is very different. We have a joke in the UAE saying, "Oh, Dubai is the best Indian city outside India." So you get everything. All the food that you need is available there. And but I started when I moved to the UAE. I started at a newspaper desk. So there were some red lines flagged at that stage, and which was very interesting. You said, "Oh, no, oil-driven economies, no Islamic terrorism, no Persian Gulf." Those were the taboos at that time. But if just few years down the line, all those red flags started disappearing, and media was getting more democratized. So my observations mostly relate to how the media transformed in that part of the world, and Dr. Awal is far more experienced and a veteran at analyzing the Arab media and how it has shifted. But my experience working in the UAE is you work with a different crowd, so you have a far more diverse newsroom. So if you worked in India for a few years, you're working with primarily Indians, 99%. When you go there, it's like 10% in India, the rest is a mix from all over the world, and that's a good experience for any journalist. It was a good learning experience, and it just made me settle down far quicker and easily than I had expected initially. So yeah, it kind of eased me into the place, and then once you get used to the place, there's just no moving out. Then you're transiting at the
And time
Thank you.
passes and you don't realize,
yeah,
just continue. But at the end of the day, if you finish your job,
yeah,
you come, neither you have a nationality of the country, nor you
yeah,
have anything. You move
yes,
back into the
yeah,
India as
yeah,
an Indian.
yeah.
Ma'am, any other questions? I just wanted to put the final question if you want. You want to add something? Are you asking anything? Okay. I just wanted your, as a person, and I wanted to, what story you wanted to write but you didn't write that have left impact on you as a personally. Just share it with us, please.
Oh, there must be so many of them, and but these are the stories that most of my investigative stories happened when I was business editor of a magazine, and that is when we were writing about, and that is also when the Dubai property market was going through this massive, boom and bust cycle. So I put together a supplement in which 20 CEOs of real estate companies were featured. They got interviewed, and I asked very similar set of questions to all of them, and all of them said, "Oh, this is going to be a fantastic year, and we have X number of launches, and we are going to sell X number of units, blah blah." And next year, when the crash was about to happen 2 months earlier, we did this. We did a similar supplement, and the answers were still the same. We are going to have another great year, and the market collapsed a few months later. So there were lots of stories. I mean, there was an investment bank that did a major story on. Sometimes when you piece them all together and it's like 90%, you sit down with the publisher and he says, no, I think we need to either plug the gap or just drop the story. I wouldn't say which ones I had to, but there were cases in which embezzlement had happened from one organization to another, individuals embezzling funds, some of them being moved to Kuwait and other places, share market manipulation and things like that. And you would assume that such stories should appear, but I would definitely leave you with one story which was not reported, which was a couple, which I have written about that in the book, and a couple who made 90,000 dirhams just by staying in the queue through the night to buy a property in the morning. By the time he hit the window, the property prices had gone up and he couldn't afford it. So he was about to bail out when this another gentleman who was there, he said, "No, you buy at whatever rate and sell it to me, and I'll pay you the difference." So he buys the property from the window, goes back to his office, sells it to him, and makes his 90,000 dirhams, goes back. So I was teaching at a university at that time, and I asked students, "Do you know this story?" It never got reported because nobody got to know about it because nobody reported it. So those are sorts of stories. Lots of them got missed out, but yeah, that's part of the landscape, media landscape that exists in that part of the world.
I enjoyed you listening to you and all of us. And thank you so much for coming. And it goes without forgetting that I should also thank Tokir
Yes.
for bringing this book to my notice and telling me that you are available. Though I have been with Al Arabiya and the MBC for long, but I also came to know that you are also worked in Al Arabiya editor
Yeah.
in English.
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming. On behalf of the Foreign Correspondent Club, I would thank you and thank everybody who are attending this whoever is online with us, and we'll be more than happy to share with the author also signatory of his book. If you are the books are available at the concessional rate. If anybody is interested, feel free. free to buy a book and get it signed from the author. Thank you so much. I would like to present you a token
Thank
from
you.
the club.
Oh, I should be giving you this. Thank you very
All
much.
the best.
Thanks for your
Good to see
time.
you.
And
Thank you
thanks
so
for-
much. Thank you, everybody. Please join us for the coffee. Sure. Thank you. Thank you.